So the big story on Twitter recently was that Louis C.K. made a low-key return to stand-up comedy, performing for the first time in about 11 months since he admitted to masturbating in front of 5 confirmed women who he asked, and they consented, but with mental reservations they later decided were too uncomfortable to keep private. I say low-key because it was a 15-minute drop-in set at the Comedy Cellar, though people are reacting like he immediately sold out Madison Square Garden again. You can refer to Stream of Consciousness episode 75 if you want a refresher on what my thoughts were when that story first broke about him confessing. From hearsay, it sounds like it was a pretty basic set. No mention of the scandal, just garden variety Louis C.K. material, and the crowd absolutely cheered when they announced him coming up, because people tend to get excited when the former top comedian in the country pops out of an unfortunate retirement to tell jokes again. The backlash has been predictable, and in some cases outright ridiculous. A common theme was how Louis C.K. had once again forced himself on an audience without their consent, except A, he had the consent of the women he jerked off in front of, B, consent has nothing to do with going to see live comedy shows, especially where drop-ins by surprise guests are common, and C, you could leave. You're not trapped in a comedy show. Get up and walk the fuck out if you're so traumatized. I saw a tweet that said Louis C.K. assaulted every woman in the audience, and not just in the audience, but by extension every woman in the world, by deciding to perform comedy as a comedian again. Hysterical. Let me put aside my indignation against everyone else's indignation for a second and ask a hard question. What makes the victimhood of Louis C.K.'s haters, for lack of a better term, theoretically, what makes the victimhood of his haters outweigh the support of his fans? Why should it? I guarantee you he has more fans than haters, even now. Yet his shelved but completed movie, I Love You Daddy, is still unreleased. And by the way, Chloe Grace Moretz starred in that movie, and she did an interview where she said it shouldn't ever see the light of day. And I can't imagine a more entitled thing to say coming from one person who worked on something as a team with hundreds of other people and is fine with completely invalidating all of their effort as long as women across the country don't have to feel uncomfortable knowing there's a movie out there they don't have to fucking watch. Let's not pretend this is a gender war either. Plenty of women are Louis C.K. fans. Plenty of women don't feel sick at the thought of his life not being completely ruined. Plenty of women would probably happily watch him masturbate in front of them. You know I'm not wrong. But his movie is shelved, his work is less available than it used to be, and he can't make an appearance at a comedy show without setting the world on fire. If you've been a victim of abuse, assault, or sexual impropriety, and you view Louis C.K. as a symbolic harbinger of pain and sexual tyranny, what makes you think your view should matter at all in the grand scheme of how the rest of his career plays out? Your opinion and experience are of little consequence to the rest of the world. It's harsh, but true. There are 5 understandable people confirmed who can have a specifically tailored interest in not seeing Louis C.K. on stage ever again. But the way that's going to manifest is by them not watching Louis C.K. on stage ever again. Not him not ever being on stage ever again. It's not Louis C.K.'s fault the rest of you are triggered by traumas from your past. You've elected him as a representative of your suffering without his consent, ironically. He only has to atone for 5 confirmed people. He didn't do shit to you that you're not actually just doing to yourself by choosing to attribute all this stuff to him. And please stop calling it sexual assault. He didn't lay a hand on anyone but himself. All you do is cheapen actual sexual assault allegations. It's like when a soccer player gets elbowed a little on the field and he falls over screaming like he's passing a kidney stone. That's some fake bullshit. There's a difference between rape and watching something unpleasant. If you don't think so, you're not a rational person. But that's part of the problem, is this has nothing at all to do with rationality. It's a moral argument. And moral arguments are inherently flawed and stupid because not everyone shares the same morals. It revolves around the idea of a universal understanding of what it means to be a decent human being, which is an extraordinarily riddled with holes concept. Moral arguments beget moral arguments. Arguing morals with logic is a dead end when the moral side refuses to acknowledge those rules. They only care about what makes them feel good in the end. It's entirely selfish when you think about it. Arguing logic for self-fulfillment is selfish too, but it has the benefit of being actually universal because when your logic is perfect, people have to accept it. They can still try and moral around it, but they have to say, that makes sense, but it's unfair, or something. Moral arguments are incapable of perfection. There will always be disconnect and variability, so their primary use is to manipulate and guilt agreements out of people. Coincidentally, you won't see a single argument against Louis C.K. that isn't a moral one, while you won't see an argument in favor of him like mine that isn't logical. You can't win with a moral argument in favor of him here, because you can't weigh his 11-month punishment against the careers some of his victims lost, even though they chose to quit, and like I said the last time I talked about this, if they'd let this get in the way of their supposed passion, they probably weren't going to be very successful anyway. You just have to say logically, 99% of the dissent doesn't matter. He's here whether you like it or not, and you have no right to feel entitled to any other outcome because whatever past you've overcome is completely disconnected and unrelated. Also, Louis C.K. is half Mexican, so everyone speaking out against him is racist and a Nazi. There's a moral argument half this country can understand. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.